Gen that was. The gen that was.
The gen that was.
The gen that was.
The gen that was.
This is the gen that was.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Gen That Was 2016. The train keeps on rolling. We're getting to be into Christmas territory, rapidly approaching, as you can tell from the decorations behind me. This episode, I am pleased to be joined by Brandon Jones.
Howdy.
Michael Huber.
Decorations in November, bold choice.
Oh, yeah.
You got something to say? You got something to
I
say?
respect it.
You got something to say?
Wow.
Do you know why it
I
happened?
respect it.
I think
Archery's up.
I think this is the soonest that we've done it, but I think we've just been in our apartment so much that we're just like, let's just put up the
Refresh.
Christmas. Yeah. It was just, that was really what was motivating it, because we've definitely complained about people setting up Christmas decorations too early, but I think we've just seen the same thing way too much that it was like, let's change it.
Perfect.
And also joined by Michael Damiani.
Yo, yeah, Christmas decorations were day after Thanksgiving. Brothers and I had to help set up. That was a tradition in my parents' house.
Did you guys have like a Christmas vacation, go up on the roof, crazy amount?
No, we did. So never did that. It was like outdoor signs, like these snow rabbits and snowmen that were just like not cardboard, but whatever the material was that they were made out of. You just put those like in the dirt in the lawn, and then some lights around some of the shrubs in the front, and that was pretty much it. My dad would do anything more complicated, but we had like inside stuff. Like that was the main responsibility, was hanging lights inside and the Christmas tree and stockings and stuff like that.
It definitely changes when you have cats, because they have almost completely ripped open some presents, which is interesting, and they love sitting underneath the tree. But
You put the nice ornaments on the top of the tree.
there was a moment where the cat was in the tree. I was like, honey, the cat's like getting in the tree. She's like, no, I actually put that toy there so he would go after that specifically and not the other ornaments. And I thought that was an interesting strategy. But enough about Christmas and cats and all of that great stuff. As fun as it is to talk about, we're here to talk about the Gen That Was, and that title is very accurate now, since we were in the new generation of games. Just to give you a quick rundown of the show, if you've never watched this before, in part one, I've gathered some news stories that kind of give us a look at what was going on in that year, things that kind of jumped out to me and I thought would be interesting to talk about. In part two, I've selected 5 and only 5 games for us to talk about that I think were big games or would just generate some interesting discussion among the allies. And then in part 3, we will put our opinions to the test and actually play one of those 5 games. I'm actually very excited for the one that we're going to be playing. I don't want to give. I almost said something, but I don't want to give anything away. I'm going to let it be a surprise.
Nice.
Just a quick note, and this is going to keep happening. Definitely, we are not going to talk about everything. So there are definitely going to be major games, big points that we don't bring up. That is intentional. I think part of the fun of this show is that, it's not the Gen That Was by committee. It's Gen That Was what we really are excited to talk about, and I think would be good for the panel. And so definitely some things are going to be excluded. And I understand that if you really like those things, that might be a bit of a bummer. But yeah, we're not going to be talking about everything. This is the first story that I pulled. And I think that message of it being a curated Allies show is made abundantly clear that this is the lead story that I'm focusing on. Sega completes its acquisition of Atlas in 2016.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Completes. How long did that take?
Yeah, I completely forgotten that this was in 2016. But just kind of reading up on it, like the official figure apparently wasn't given out, but it was estimated that the deal was about 14 billion yen. Atlas's parent company, Index, filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
The year prior, I believe. And one of the benefits of this merger that they talked about, the PR manager, John Harden, who no longer works with Atlas, but he said it's going to be like, hey, we're going to be able to localize things a little bit quicker. And so that'll be nice. Something that was interesting in one of the articles that I was reading is that they mention like, hey, new IP, and we're going to prioritize console and handheld franchises. But we also want to create stuff for mobile. And I think really the only manifestation that you've seen of that is the Shin Megami Tensei Liberation D-Cross 2 game, which is pretty cool. I checked it out a little bit. But beyond that, there hasn't been a huge mobile push from Atlas that I've been able to see. You have some cool crossover stuff, like in Phantasy Star Online 2. You get like a bunch of Persona outfits. But even like the crossovers, nothing too outlandish or crazy. And so my question for you, panel, did the merger affect either your opinion of Sega or Atlas at all? Do you think things have changed perceptively for the better or worse? Did you completely forget that this happened and things are about the same? Where are you at?
I forgot.
I didn't forget. I remember this was such a big deal when it was happening because I remember there were reservations about Sega because of their parent company, Sega Sammy, that there was concerns that the creativity at Atlas would be stymied because, you know, the tendrils from that parent company would get in there. But that really hasn't come to fruition. In fact, I honestly, or to answer your other part of your question, I think it's been mostly positive, honestly, the impact of that, because we have seen a push. Took a few years, but the Atlas's games coming to PC. Right. And seeing like there's a big PC market. I mean, Sega led that push with their products, and I think they finally convinced Atlas, and Atlas is seeing just how big of a market there is out there, and especially Western audiences, and that bridge is kind of closing between, like, they're becoming a little bit more cognizant, I think, of like a world audience and world releases. There's, you know, obviously it's not quite there yet, but I mean, what was it? The most recent one, Shin Megami Tensei 5, like a simultaneous worldwide release. I mean, that might have to do with Nintendo, but like having Sega be more aware about that, I think has helped them approach like a broader audience.
It's interesting that you mentioned the fear, Damiani, because I just don't think that has manifested itself in any significant way. Like, I feel like the way Atlas produces games and what they're focusing on seems to be about the same as it was before. I think obviously you can argue that as Persona has increased in prominence, obviously they've focused more on that, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing other things. I mean, Project Refantasy, you know, is presumably still a thing. They have projects like Shin Megami Tensei. I was going to say Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem, but it's Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which is like, for a crossover, like weirdly its own thing and not too fan servicey or pandering in a way. And then you've got things like, I'm not sure if I already mentioned it, but Catherine, and then they recently updated Catherine Full Body, coming out with Shin Megami Tensei 5. And so it doesn't feel like Sega is really having any negative influence on the way that Atlas is operating, you know, from a distant consumer level, as far as I can tell. And you mentioned that the PC ports, and I know that you were alluding to this, but I just want to emphasize like how successful Persona 4 was on PC. And that just happened. Like, that just happened this year. And that game came out in 2008, and it did extraordinarily well on PC. And so it seems to me like Sega is really the one benefiting that, like, as the years have gone on, as the generations continue, Atlas has really only risen in prominence, right? It's not just this like super obscure, you know, not very many people have heard about it. It's not being reported in mainstream game media RPG company, but, you know, they're like a dominant force when it comes to Japanese role-playing games.
I think it's definitely the type of name that if we were watching like a Game Awards or an E3 press conference or something and like Atlas comes up, like, oh?
Yeah, right. Like Atlas comes up and that's like a huge deal. Yeah.
I keep thinking of Bungie and Blizzard Activision and Destiny and how that kind of shook out.
Yeah.
And just Damiani talking about like creativity being stymied or there being like expectations that kind of change the way the developers are making the game. And like I feel like Destiny kind of suffered from that, but it just doesn't seem like any of that negativity or business, not sketchery, but like I feel like the business decisions have not impacted this Sega Atlas merger, because again, I forgot all about it and I haven't really seen any negatives.
Maybe in a little less sunny news, tell me if you remember this: the Warner Brothers Shadow of Mordor disclosure controversy.
I remember like the controversy of the ending, having to like pay or grind or something.
I think you're talking about Shadow of War. Yeah, so this is Shadow of Mordor.
Okay.
So what happened with Shadow of Mordor is YouTubers were paid to play Shadow of Mordor, and they were specifically asked to not show any bugs or glitches. But beyond that, they wanted it so that the disclosure of like, hey, this is a sponsored video was like kind of buried in the description. It was hard to find, so hard to tell if it was a sponsored video. And Warner Brothers, like, obviously they had to go through and they had to make it more transparent and clear. But this was definitely something that was being talked about. And it's interesting because, you know, this is a specific example that I'm pulling from 2016. But I think this conversation about how we disclose things and practices on YouTube, you know, is still very much relevant today.
Yes. That stuff gives me such anxiety. You know, one of my biggest fears is just personally of just being called a shill or, you know, just a fanboy. And, you know, this is 4 years ago. And now I feel like it's becoming more transparent. You know, I see the hashtag ad on a lot of things. Yeah, I feel like you can't really get away with it as much as in 2016 when this was going down.
It's a good evidence because a lot of people are like, you know, we know these things are happening behind the scenes. It's like, look how much fervor this caused, you know, this one, you know, tiny thing. It's like, if things like this were happening as regularly, then a lot of people, you know, accuse the industry of, we would be hearing more, there would be more headlines like this. There would be more people talking, you know, against it. But boy, did this not hurt WB, because by the time I was reviewing Shadow of War, I totally forgot about this. You know, like this did not come up even in the next game in the series. It wasn't like, you better not do what you did before. And I am shocked that when you mentioned it, I completely forgot that this had happened.
I think because we've probably had more instances of this happening in the time that's followed, that it just is generally assumed that there's always been a controversy of some kind. Maybe not to the same scale, but we've always had like, I forget their names, the ones who were like promoting that the betting site or whatever when they had stakes in it.
You're talking about CSGO?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's been so many ones I think that have eclipsed stuff like this that start to involve money, where it's like when there's no transparency about like your opinion, you're getting paid to say nice things. That's a level of like breaking trust. But when you are doing that on top of profiting off of people, you know, like by deceiving them as well, that is, you know, that type of stuff. And then we've, you know, it gets tied into all that stuff in the same thing. But I think I agree with Huber. I think this generally places have cracked down more on it. It ties into the whole fight, you know, with you know, labeling things correctly so people get accurate and truthful information. Yeah. Like Twitch now, like for sponsorships, part of the rule is in your title you must put sponsored or sponsorship. A lot of social media sites now will, when you tweet it, you need to tag it, and it will like put a big little tag at the bottom saying this is a paid sponsored piece of content. Right. So I think it's, if you don't do that, you're like, it's just easier to get in trouble. You're gonna get caught on it. You're gonna get called on it. And you know, how many times has Blood told us, gotta include that review copy provided by PlayStation and stuff.
That's what I wanted to bring up. Is like, we're in 2020, almost 2021 now, though, and I feel like addressing it, though. Do you guys feel this way? Even addressing that something is provided, there's a certain section of the audience will then just immediately take that as a paid ad.
So this is actually something that you're touching on a point that I wanted to bring up, Huber, where I think, you know, having things become more clear and enforcing those sort of lines of separation between what's sponsored and what's not has improved, and that's good. I think that's a strictly good thing. But the waters have been muddied in a way that can be kind of frustrating, where I think skepticism from an audience is healthy and should be encouraged. You shouldn't just take everything at face value and just gleefully swallow it all down. But there are times where I think, because there have been bad instances that happen, people confuse enthusiasm or excitement or unadulterated joy as insincere. And I don't think that is healthy either. I don't think negativity is inherently more valuable than positivity. And I think you can have you can have amazing points and be incredibly enthusiastic. Just like somebody can have amazing points and be extremely critical. And so I think you do see that sometimes with audiences where they just don't embrace positivity, I think, sometimes as easily. And it's not everyone, of course, right? I'm painting in very broad strokes, but just a personal observation.
But it is interesting, Huber, as a film buff, this is not something necessarily that, is spoken of in the same way in the film industry. Of people that go to a premiere and they would talk about something, you would be like, oh, did you get your movie ticket for free? You're like, yeah, I went to the premiere.
That's so funny.
Did you walk on the red carpet and people took pictures of you? Like, yes, because that's how premieres work. And that's not a lot of people discrediting people's opinions because of the access that they're given. It's just pricier for a lot of these things. You have you're living with this game for a much longer period of time.
Is that because of these early examples of these WB instances that have, like you were saying, Ben, kind of muddied the water, where just any kind of communication between the developer and the content creator is perceivably sketch?
I don't think it's any one specific thing. I think it is like an entire culture, right? And I think it's frustration that is building up, right? Because like you have instances like this, right, where you have influencers, maybe not acting as great as they should be, not being as forward with where they're coming from as they should be. But it's more than that, right? It's like people spending $60 on a game and having it completely not work, right? Like I think there are multiple instances of trust being broken or feeling like you're not really being valued as a consumer. And I think those feelings are absolutely justifiable. But we are just so inundated with advertising, right? Like anywhere you go to watch something or play something or anything, like ads are just shoved into like every possible nook and cranny of your life. And I think that can create desensitization as well, or make you feel like things aren't really sincere if like 24 hours a day you feel like somebody's trying to sell you something. And so I think it's a lot of things, and it's all very complex. But I also think it's a mistake to think that like everything is all bad all the time, or people can't enjoy something or be happy about something. Sadly, we're going to be moving on to more sad news, but that's just how it goes sometimes. 2016, Microsoft shuts down Lionhead Studios.
Oh, that was 2016.
Yeah.
Thought that was before. Dang.
Do you know why it's 2016? Because I mentioned this in the first video we ever produced as Easy Allies.
Nice.
That was also 2016.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I was gonna bring this up. It felt weird talking about the year kind of in review and not mentioning that this was also the year that Game Trailers shut down. I don't really want to go into it because this is not a show about us. It's not really the proper venue for us to kind of go into great detail there. But I did want to mention, this was also the year Game Trailers shut down.
We are doing better currently than the Fable franchise, but things might change in the next couple of years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Things can change very quickly. I want to credit Wesley Yin-Pool of Eurogamer. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He has a really, really, really in-depth story. It's extremely long, but there's a lot of stuff in there on Eurogamer. So if you want to know more, if you want to go into much, much greater detail than we're going to go in here, I encourage you to check that out. But Fable Legends, which I forgot was a thing, was shut down in March.
Loved it. Played it multiple times.
You played it multiple times because I never played it at any event.
I played it at E3. Loved
it. Dude, this is one of those multiplayer games. It was
Yep.
like legit competitive, where like I would play it, and then like a dev would be, you know, the puppeteer or the master or the wizard or whatever they called it, and then like I'd be like, oh, I want to play that, and like I would go up and I would play, and you would like trap people in rooms, and then like spawn like a cyclops on them, and they would be stuck because like I dropped the wall on them, and all the devs would be behind me like cracking up and cheering. Like it was just such a I played it at 2 separate events, and the booth was positive. Like these were people that had a lot of fun with this game. And I remember, like, even for, you know, the map was simple. You know, there weren't that many characters. This wasn't a very complex game, but it looked great. I remember the outfits were really great. The effects were really great. Like, the Fable franchise has always performed really well. I mean, not necessarily to expectations, because it kind of, wrote checks that it couldn't cash a lot of times. But it was just always a very pretty series, and like the music and the world and the acting and the writing, like it was just always something that I held to a certain standard, which blew my mind that I had so much experience with the game, and then gone.
Yeah, I'm still shocked that game got canned and that all went down, because just echoing what you said, Jones, I played it at E3 and it was awesome.
Yeah.
Like it's so crazy. Maybe because the game got canceled, so I always think about that moment, but that's like one of my strongest E3 memories ever. Just playing that game.
I mean, this was before Fortnite. This was before Apex. This was before a lot of free-to-play models really proved like, hey, give it a shot.
Could have been
if it doesn't,
seasonal. Oh.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it was so bizarre to have a team, to have executives look at all the work that had been done on that and see no value at all. Be like, man, we're done.
Yeah,
like we're not even gonna pass this on or have somebody pick it up.
They hadn't figured it out yet. That sucks. Like I mean, free to play was
Such
a
a good
thing,
point.
but games as a service wasn't really a thing just yet. They were like
Wasn't a popular thing.
they were a
That's
little bit
so
too
wild.
soon. They were a little too soon, man. They missed that window by just a little bit. Yeah.
Oh my god, that game would have probably thrived today.
My own personal experience with the Fable franchise is I remember the build up to Fable 1 and like the language that they were using to describe it. I just remember reading it and they were like, this is going to change the world. Like, we're going to have the world and characters interact in a way that like you've never seen before in video. Like, it was that kind of language.
Trees are gonna grow in real time.
Molyneux seems like an excellent salesman.
Yeah. Well, then I
Leaves
played Fable 1
narratives.
and it wasn't that. Like, I think if my expectations were different, I think I would have appreciated a lot more than I did. Where it's like, yeah, this is like a cool action role-playing game that has some neat mechanics, but it wasn't like this, take me to the moon game.
I hate to say this to you, but it felt like how much build-up Shenmue had when it was coming out. I was like, this is the game changer of all game changers. This changes things forever.
Yeah.
And I understand you can appreciate it after it came out, but it was like, don't think this changed gaming forever.
No.
Sorry.
Reading about this topic, it seems like there was some tension between Lionhead and Microsoft, where they like Microsoft is basically like, "Hey, we want you to make more money." They had a pitch for Fable 4, and they're like, "No," and they kind of got like shoehorned into this games as a service model, and they were kind of like caught off guard when Microsoft was like, we want to do play anywhere and we want cross-platform play between PC and Xbox. They're like, well, that makes things harder for us because that creates problems with cheating on PC. And I really just sensed some kind of like a lot of tension there with what the studio was wanting and what Microsoft was wanting and not really coming to full agreement there, which is sad. And thinking about it, man, this last generation, so many high-profile cancellations on Microsoft's side. I mean, you've got Fable Legends.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
You've got Scalebound. You've got Phantom Dust.
Yeah. Preach.
Yeah. Our last story, certainly not the biggest story, kind of like this tiny little story that I picked out, but I thought it was so interesting, and I don't remember it at all, that I just had to share it with you guys. Sony tried and did not file a trademark for the words "Let's Play." They tried to trademark "Let's Play." Do you guys remember this?
No.
I remember there was a battle for Let's Play. I remember, Rooster Teeth certainly made a lot of efforts over the years for that. But I remember that. I remember that was a thing. Where everyone was like, who owns this? Is this a thing? Are you doing my genre? It's like, your genre. What are you talking about? It's like reactions. Like, I own reactions. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, the reactions one came like later. That was like what the Fine brothers tried to argue that. This was like on the heels of the Epic trademark or something, right? Like there was like a dispute about the word epic or something, and everyone was like fighting over it. There's something like that, and then this happened, and it was just like come on, like you can't do this. This is absurd. Like this is never gonna fly. And it was just like funny that someone got paid to be in a meeting and say like, yeah, this is your job, is to come up with this and like at least account for this, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but that was,
well, stranger things have happened, and that's why. I mean, that's executives, lawyers, people that got this much money and this much clout. It's like, hey, let's try. Like if you ask them, they'll probably be like, no, we think that we have a very strong case, because if you look at the fine print, we're deep down, they're like, we're not going to win this, but you might as well, you never know, could get lucky.
A wrinkle to the story that I thought was interesting, and reading up on it at Polygon and Eurogamer, is that the reason it was rejected from the Trademark and Patent Office was not that it's a generic term originally. It's that there was a Georgia company called Let's Play with LET''Z, and they filed a trademark, and they were like, oh, it's going to get confusing between these two things. And then a law firm stepped in with a letter of protest, and they're like, no, like it's worse because this is a generic term that a lot of people rely on. And now the rejection is firm enough to the point where it's like, okay, Sony's not going to be able to do this. Like, it's understood that you can't trademark this super common language. But moves like this just feel so filthy. Like, they feel so opportunistic.
So
yeah.
It's just another way that these publishers are trying to gain a foothold to better craft and control the messaging,
right?
Control the narrative around their games, because all of a sudden, if they had won that, especially if Sony had won that, all of a sudden any YouTuber makes Let's Plays, it's like, like not only do we like force you to change your stuff, but in the act of doing one of these, you have to adhere to our guidelines now because we have the rights to that. I assume people maybe try and come up with something else, but what stops Sony's lawyers from going after? You called it something else, but still the same thing. That it gets so, as you said, like that would muddy the waters so much when they start, going in that direction, trying to have control over content creation. Right. And we have seen that shift in the past generation. You've seen less of a need for certain things in the past that were traditionally held by other people. Like, we all by de facto now assume trailers are going to be on each publisher's YouTube channel.
Right.
10 years ago, that wasn't the case, you know? Yeah.
I mean, Damian, it's so funny that you say that, because when I pull footage for the show, I'm trying to pull from official, like, PlayStation or game publisher YouTube channels for this stuff that we're using. Yeah.
This is the very definition of backdoor shady deals. Just suits and money people in the back of the office, just crunching numbers. How can we make a buck?
Right.
What's the best way to make a buck?
This is buying Park Place while you're in the bathroom. It's like you get back to the table. Like, what happened? Where'd these hotels come from? What the hell?
I think it's just an important element to bring up, because I think with the nature of this show, obviously we're going to praise Sony and Microsoft in different ways. Like, we spent a good chunk of the last episode just talking about how glorious Bloodborne is, and it's true, it is. And again, going back to that perspective where it's like, it's not good to just be entirely cynical, but it's not good to just be entirely positive either, right? Like, sometimes there are just these stark reminders where it's like, oh, these companies, care about money sometimes, or it comes across in a way that doesn't have your best interests at heart, or like you said, Damiani, they're trying to control things. And you're seeing it even with, Nintendo and the Smash Brothers tournament and how they shut that down, and the controversy that caused. And it's just so weird because it's punishing the people that love you the most and are doing like the most advertising for you. I think the way that this media works is that you put it out there and then people interpret it. You know, they cosplay, they make videos, they write stories. And like without that, like that's like the beating heart of your thing. And I think you want to encourage it, but so often I feel like people just try to stamp it out or view it as like a threat to them when it's like not a threat in any way at all, and it's the total opposite. It's giving them more recognition.
I think this may be there's I don't know the thinking what Sony was doing. We've speculated here, and there's even reasons we haven't even come up with. A thing I would wager was a big concern though is this was we were getting into era where, I mean, by nature, Let's Plays, they have commentary, but they generally play through the entire game.
Yes.
I think we were starting to see a rise, at this time with the rise of Twitch, rise of YouTube, that streamers and Let's Players were just straight up putting entire games up there for you to watch. Mm-hmm. And certain games, by their nature, are very story driven. So you'd see publishers say, wait a second, you are actually going to hurt our sales. Like, we understand the argument that you were just making, Ben, that this is a great way it's free marketing. It shares your game. It gets people very excited about your game to see it. But some publishers saying this crosses a line because like a game, like a Telltale game, people are like, wait, that's like majority of the game. If you show it off, like, why would someone go back and replay it? Obviously, there's different choices you can make. There's totally stuff, but from their perspective, that might have been going too far.
Right, and I think on some level, you can sympathize with that because, every game that comes out, you can go onto YouTube and there's a no commentary, no face cam upload of everything that happens in the game. But I think it's hard, and maybe there is data pointing to like it having a significant detrimental effect. But I just look at the way video games are selling and the way that these companies are doing, and it just doesn't seem that way. Like even if a lot of people are watching these games, like there has to be a significant number that maybe start watching and they're like, I don't really want to play it, and then they watch an hour and they're like, actually, no, this is really cool. And then they go out and buy it. And so I think there's just so many variables at play that I think you really have to think carefully about what you're doing and who you're affecting. And sometimes it doesn't always seem like these companies have that pause where they just kind of see something that's really not that big of a deal and they overreact and they stamp the foot down too hard. And it's like, if you take a step back, it's like, this really wasn't going to hurt you, right? Like I think about the Nintendo situation where it's like, listen, you're think about how old Melee is. Like this is of no perceivable threat to you.
Yeah. Well, and even especially if you look at 2020, it's like Twitch numbers up. Switch sales up,
right?
PlayStation 4, Spider-Man broke sales records before Miles Morales and Remastered even came out. Mm-hmm. People just went and bought the old game. It's just like all the rising tides raises all of the boats. Like if people are excited about games, that benefits streamers, that benefits developers, publishers, console manufacturers, everybody.
Thank you for watching part 1. A lot of I really didn't think about this as I was doing it, but a lot of just like interesting, like kind of controversial things that happened in 2016 that I picked up on. But part 2 will have a very different tone because holy hell, a lot came out in 2016. A lot of like really significant things, like kind of landmark games for the generation in a lot of ways. Super excited to talk about it with the panel, and we will see you in just a second. All right, welcome back to part 2 of the gen that was, leading off with a banger, a game that got so much buzz and attention and the day it came out, won a lot of Game of the Year awards. Of course, we're talking about Overwatch. And Huber, I remember going to BlizzCon, I think it was the year prior, I think it was in 2015, and playing Overwatch and us just being ecstatic about it. Like we were thrilled at the level of quality that we were seeing.
Yeah. We wanted them to release it right then and there.
Right. We were like, what are you waiting for? Yeah, that was the joke. It's like, this seems done.
Yeah.
It was a level of polish that you just almost never get with things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was exciting because Blizzard, obviously, we grew up with, some of the most legendary and iconic series in all of games, StarCraft, Diablo, Warcraft. So for them to go new IP, first-person shooter. It was just exciting. It's like the only word I can really use. It was electric. It was a big deal. It has the triple threat of quality, of competitiveness. You know, it was so big competitively. It still is. Overwatch is still going strong. And then characters that people can get invested in or cosplay as. It was, you know, you can invest in Overwatch as much as you want. And if you're all in, there's a lot there for you, either competitively or socially or both.
Yeah. Huber, I really want to touch on the characters because, you know, this is a game that doesn't have a story mode. Obviously, as you're seeing right now, you know, they did incredible Blizzard quality cinematics, but you don't get a lot of that through the game. So I think it really speaks to how the characters talk to each other, the abilities that they have, the roles that they fulfill, and just the raw aesthetic value that they have. I mean, people got obsessed with these characters. I mean, it felt like people would go to war for like Diva or Tracer or Mei or Genji or Hanzo. Like it was like an extreme level of attachment for characters that when you're playing, you don't even see, you know, the face. You see the guns and stuff a lot of times with what you're controlling. Of course, that's not strictly true, but you know, largely true in the first-person game.
This trailer, 10 out of 10. This is
It
a
is,
10.
yeah.
I mean, this is one of the best trailers I've ever seen in my entire life. And this is a great example, Huber, of a CG trailer. This is the purpose of a CG trailer, is to show me a part of this world. Is to show me a part of this world that I couldn't see, tell it in a way, the best way you possibly could. Yeah, you could do this in the game engine. It wouldn't look as good. I just think it wouldn't necessarily have the same impact. This reminds me of Aliens, because this... In as much as Aliens coined the whole group vibe, like the whole sci-fi, well, you got the crew, you know, and like there's, you know, Jonesy and there's, you know, Smith over there, and they got that guy's the engineer, and there's just sci-fi movie after sci-fi movie again and again. They just tried to capture that lightning in a bottle that Aliens had. And I'm just like, okay, here we go again. Like, you want to make me love this crew. Half of them are going to die. It's just like the same formula again and again. And it felt, obviously League of Legends predates this, but it really felt like so many people, Apex managed to, you know, to do it. Lawbreaker certainly did not. You know, like so many franchises that were like, okay, how about this group of people? And it was so funny that the audiences just immediately were like, nope, don't like them. You know, like, and it just shows that, you know, that is why Blizzard is as successful as they are, is that they can make, you know, that they took stuff that they had learned from making, you know, amazing characters like Arthas that crossed genres, that crossed, generations, and just make you instantly love people. The gorilla, sorry.
Winston.
The moment he drops in, you're just like, well, I love this guy. The moment Tracer shows up, like, well, I love her. You know, I don't even know her backstory, but I got to figure it out. Just something, you know, kind of like that Disney Pixar, you know, just the way to make something in 60 seconds, make somebody just immediately endearing. And
I think the thing that's important to keep in mind, and this is, of course, nothing to sneeze at, but for years and years and years and years and years, like when you thought of Blizzard, it was StarCraft, Diablo, Warcraft. That was it. They didn't do anything else. You know, if they were going to do a project, it was set within that universe. And so for this to come out and grab attention in the way that it did, I mean, it instantly met that level. I mean, when we're talking about StarCraft and Diablo and Warcraft, I mean, these are some of the biggest names in games and have been for a while. And so for Overwatch to just like immediately stand alongside those things, I think is just extraordinarily impressive. And I think Overwatch does a lot right. Like even just like walking around the maps in Overwatch is a treat. I mean, there's so much going on. There's so much detail. They're also different for each other. They're beautiful. Like Hanamura is just an absolutely gorgeous place to be in. I think identifying with a role and having it feel different, like giving it, like there are matches where when I'm playing as a tank and it's just like people are behind me and you're leading the charge, how different that feels than if you're running around trying to snipe people and I think that variety and how you can feel valuable in different ways is a super powerful feeling. It's the same sort of thing in World of Warcraft. But for as much praise as I have of Overwatch, and every time I revisit it, I have a good time. It is amazing how much I've cooled on the game, and going from like absolutely enthralled to like being very passively interested in it. And when like something new happens in Overwatch, me just kind of shrugging my shoulders, like maybe I'll check it out, maybe I won't.
That's what you lose with not having a campaign, I think.
Yeah.
There's no when does it stop? You know, like when do there's no natural feeling to like, okay, now I can step away from it, or
Right.
you know, like you, Damiani, with 14. You know, it's like you kind of have natural ebbs and flows that you know happen around big events, or you know, new classes being added or new stories being continued. And with this, it's like you're just kind of naturally forcing your player base into that situation where they just get to a point where they're like, I got to step away from this, and it feels bad, but something else came out, or I just, you know, I got to take a break.
Yeah, for me, it's as a casual player, there's only one way to really engage with Overwatch. You queue up for some matches, and that's it. Get good, change your hero, use your different moves, your different compositions.
Yeah.
Whereas something like an MMO or a Fortnite allows me to engage with it in so many different ways. It's why years later I have still not fallen off of Fortnite, because I can explore the map, do challenges, do different things. And that was always my hope with Overwatch. You know, they would have those cool like Halloween events that added some co-op into the mix, and you know, fighting against robots in that other event. Like, I wanted them to do more special events like that. And obviously Overwatch 2 is hopefully planning to do more of that. So yeah, just I fell off equally as hard, Ben, because it was like, all right, once I got the exact Reinhardt skin I wanted, and you know, the Winston skin I wanted, there was nothing to drive me to play more other than to improve my skill.
Right. Yeah, I think Overwatch is in such a strange position and suffers from different things. And I think one of the things that it suffers from is like Blizzard being Blizzard. And what I mean by that is part of me feels like Blizzard kind of still operates in a time where like the world kind of revolved around them. And I think about the days of like, you know, early World of Warcraft or like Diablo 2 or something, and like people would play these games for years and years and years. And I just feel like there was less competing for people's attention at that time. And I think that the games they were making that were so good that people would be willing to put up with like long periods of things staying the same or not being quite right or something being frustrating. Because now, you know, there were comparisons to like Final Fantasy 14 and Fortnite, and the way that those games handle games as a service feels so dramatically different. It feels like there is something major, like earth-shattering, always going on in those games. Like every time you check in, it's like there is some crazy new event, we're doing a new expansion, we're having this crossover, and it's just like aggressively competing for your attention in a way that I feel like Blizzard has not really been able to capitalize on quite as effectively.
That is so well put. I love that, Ben. And it's such a great way to look at how the industry has changed dramatically since this game released. That is, it fascinates the hell out of me. Yeah, because Blizzard just historically moves so slow.
All right, so the next game that we're going to talk about is one that, if nothing else, provokes strong feelings. Very divisive entry in the storied series, Final Fantasy 15. And I think it's interesting. This is definitely a game that people felt massively disappointed by. I think there were some people that liked it. I think a lot of the allies, myself included, really was able to suffer through some of the less good parts and enjoy a lot of things. But opinions are all over the place. And I want to know if over the years, if your feelings have changed and just kind of where you stand, because I think Final Fantasy is something that is deeply important to all of us.
I love this game. I love it.
Why do you love
I'm probably... bonds, obviously.
Yeah.
Any good Final Fantasy has some strong bonds.
Yeah.
And just the road trip nature of it. This kind of royal family on the run. I just really like the premise. I really like the world. And, you know, we can debate Final Fantasies amongst Final Fantasies. Obviously, that's part of the fun in a big franchise is ranking the entries. But just as its own game, I think it's really strong. I think the combat is really good. The story can be, you know, like you were saying, ups and downs with some of the lesser aspects of the game. But just the total package, the world and the combat and the quests and the exploration, I thought were really good.
You mentioned bonds, and I actually do think that is extremely relevant because Final Fantasy, you know, renowned for its characters. I mean, you know, I mentioned people go into war for Overwatch characters. You know, people have been doing that for decades with Final Fantasy characters. You know, just so many different games, so many incredible stories, so many incredible characters. But I think about like the way Final Fantasy is told a lot of times, and it's like you always have those moments where it's like, okay, well, this is the moment where we're going to go into this character's backstory, or this is the moment where we're going to like spend time with them. You know, it's a little regimented, and that's not to say that isn't the case in Final Fantasy 15, but I think its more open world format allows for, I think, those bonds to be felt a little bit more subtly. Like when you're on the road and like Prompto is like, hey man, like let's go and take a photo, or, you know, Gladio's talking to you about fishing, or Ignis is cooking you a meal. And I think it does a really good job of letting you buy into the authenticity of how much these four characters care about each other. And I think it does a really good job of that.
I want to talk about where Final Fantasy was when this came out and kind of the lead up of just, and maybe why I loved it so much. It's like, yeah, we went through the whole Versus 13 and the delays and how long this took to come out. But as somebody who went through the entire 13 trilogy of which I like also, it was nice to have a fresh world. I know it's kind of in the Fabula Nova Crystallis thing, like it's kind of muddied there, but it was nice to get back to like a full-on open world. It just felt a little more traditional Final Fantasy, but also like, yo, this is 15, this is new combat style. So I liked the balance and kind of where it came out and after, because it feels like sometimes Final Fantasy, the games are what's the word I'm looking for? Like not eternal, but it's like they're always relevant all the time. All the Final Fantasies can be compared at any given moment, at any time. So I don't know. I think that's interesting. It's not like, oh, here's a sequel. It's like, no, this is the next entry in this franchise that is always just, it has a presence always.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that I admire about it, and of course, I think this is what creates such strong feelings, is how aggressively it tries to do something different every time. And like, it's funny because like something like Bravely Default will come out and it's like, oh man, this is like making me feel like older Final Fantasies used to. And, you know, it has that appeal to nostalgia in some ways. And I think that's great. And I want that to exist. But I don't want things to only be that. Like, I don't want us trying to make Super Nintendo and PS1 JRPGs exclusively. I want that to exist, and I don't think we should just completely discard that. But I also want to try new things and go different places and, you know, create new styles and new stories.
I feel bad because I feel like at some point I am going to need to play through the current version of this game.
Yeah, I need to as well.
To see where it is, because I will agree with Huber's point that I think this game does a good job of forging a relationship between the four main characters in the small intimate moments, the campfires, the car scenes driving along, the pit stops that they make. I feel like I always hesitate to talk because I feel like I'm a little bit in the minority of the group here, but I don't view 15 very favorably among Easy Allies, the original release of it. I think it stumbles at a lot of its major plot points, and I feel like while I'm invested in the characters, I'm not really invested in anything else in this world. Anything it was ever building up to, it kind of dropped the ball on a lot of that. The DLC that came after, being told that, oh, that fills in the stuff. It should have been in the game, but it fills in. That felt a little bit of, I don't want to say betrayal, but, you know, a little bit of like, you know, I feel upset about that, or disappointed, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm glad they tried to do an open world Final Fantasy game as well. Like the sense of like exploration, like how do we do that old school feeling of going through an overworld map, but we haven't been able to do that in so long, and it kept going more and more. Like I think it culminated with 12, where it felt like MMO zones, and then as you said, Huber, they went to the state of Final Fantasy. They went to 13, which was a completely drastically different direction from any of the games. To this was, I felt that was a good choice and a good direction. There's parts of the world that are really good, but then there's parts of it where I don't feel like I don't know. I don't feel like there was a lot of great exploration in the game, so much as there were parts of the map, like I'm going to go over this corner of the map eventually. Once I get used to showing this in trailers and stuff, you get a flying car, you can fly, but then you see how not big the world really is. And I know I haven't played the newer stuff. I don't know if they've expanded like the time skip part. Like I wanted to play in that World of Ruin part.
Yeah,
they didn't really let you do that in the original. You just kind of go to the end.
I thought that was one of the coolest ideas in the game too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, okay, here we go. Now I see what we've been building up to.
Yeah.
It just the best way, but I don't want to spend too long on this. To make my point succinct here, much like the development of this game, I think it's just the product of its development. That so many things were going wrong, some things got right, and in the end, it's just like this mess of ideas that had to be pulled together to finally. It is an amazing feat that this game came out is at least how it did in the end.
Right,
I was expecting it to be much worse after all the stuff that had gone on. So that in that regard, it was definitely a pleasant surprise. And there's definitely some high points in this game. It's just, man, I do sympathize with people who saw what was to be in the Versus 13. Like the trailer we saw of like the Leviathan stuff with the Uncharted looking climbing. But as a friend put it, that game never existed, and it never released, never played. So this is what we have, and I don't know. This game is just, it's a whole mix of emotions, and it's just a very complex and complicated game to really talk about, man.
Damiani, I know you said you were hesitant because your opinion differed, but you like everything that you're saying is correct. You know, as someone who does ultimately like this game. It is unquestionably a mess. Like it is just a messy, like almost comically sloppy in some instances. I mean, there are story things that happen entirely off screen that aren't explained. There are just so many holes. There are just moments that flat out don't work or are poorly done. Yeah, man, there's a lot, and I think your complaint about the world is valid. Like the side quests in this game are ass. Like they're absolutely terrible. Like it's just generic NPCs asking you to do generic things. It doesn't really
good optional dungeons though.
Yeah, that's what
sure. There are absolutely high points, but I think without a doubt there are things to criticize, and I think if anybody is like, man, this game has really disappointed me. I get that. I do. Totally. I don't think that is, quote unquote wrong. But it's weird because I almost feel the way about Final Fantasy 15 that I do about Death Stranding, where I think I could spend just about as long criticizing it as I do praising it. But at the end of the day, I think there's so much about it that I really like that feels so different from anything else that the series has done before. And the high point, there were a lot of low points, but the high points hit me so hard. Like I was emotional at the end of this game, and I felt like it had earned that emotion from me. And that always, I think when something is able to resonate that deeply with me, it means a lot. So the next game we're going to talk about, a game that, much like Final Fantasy 15, I think provokes a lot of strong feelings, especially at release. But it's remarkable how much the reputation of No Man's Sky is completely transformed. And Brandon, it's interesting because like I super believed in this game, and you did not. To the same degree that I did, and then I think you ended up liking it at release a lot more than I did.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like any sense of satisfaction when I got the script from you. Like I felt bad. I read it. I was like, "Oh no, Ben."
Yeah,
this didn't really work out. And I was playing it at the same time because I don't know if this was like a game where everyone got like advanced copies. I think like we all started playing this at the same time.
I don't remember actually. That's a good.
And I just remember you obviously like put a lot more time into it, and it was funny that like by the time I was like, "Boy, I gotta stop playing this game," and then I got your script, and you were like, what the hell happened? But it was interesting because you and I had this like infamous clash at E3,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of people since then that have reached out and they were like, "You were right, the game sucked," and it's like that's actually not what I was arguing.
Right.
I wasn't arguing that I knew what the game was going to be like. I was arguing that this game marketed itself poorly. You
Yes,
know,
and that's true.
That this game, it's like this game had mystique. Every game should have mystique. That's how you need to launch. Like you need to launch and have, we talked about Overwatch earlier in this episode where it's like, okay, I know about these characters, but what's going on in this world? I want to know. And their abilities, how do those work in combat? That's the stuff I want to know. And then there's the period of an advertising campaign where you find out. And we never got there.
Right.
It always just kind of hung on that mystique. Every time Sean would come out, he'd be like, wink. And it's like, this game comes out in a month, Sean. Stop winking at me. Like, you need to get into specific details. And then it came out and I was like, man, there's some dumb things. I'm the guy that is getting all the dots currently in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, all of them. Like I'm the guy that will go into the inventory and try to get as many dumb little, collector things that I need to find or all the little last pieces of, platinum that I need to get to build some armor I don't need. Like that totally speaks to me. And so when I just had my little laser gun and I'm blasting stuff, I wish I could find them, but I had like index cards after index cards, labeling like, what do I need? Where do I get it? What am I looking for? How much do I want? And it's tough because this is a game where you need to set your own goals. And I think a lot of people came into it not really sure what those goals were. It's kind of like Sea of Thieves. Like, why am I playing this? Why am I still playing this? What is it I'm actually looking for or trying to accomplish? And I was able to set my own goals immediately. And I mean, when I walked away from this, I have not returned since, but not because it does not interest me. It's because I know, like, I don't want to jump back into the deep end again because I don't know if I'll be able to pull myself out. But it's fascinating how this game is a verb now. Something will come out and we'll be like, yeah, this probably have a bad launch, but if they No Man's Sky it, then we're in good shape.
Yeah.
Brandon, you said the word mystique, and I think that's so perfect because mystique is something that I really value. Just as somebody who is always playing games all the time, every day, forever, I think when a game can be genuinely mysterious, I really latch onto that. But of course, the deal is that you have to make good on the mystique, right? It can't just be smoke, right? There has to be something that when you do actually go through it, that you feel rewarded for that effort. And at launch, No Man's Sky definitely didn't have that. And I say in my review, it's like, yeah, at first this is all amazing, like how quickly you can get into your ship and go into another planet, and all looks amazing. But then the more you play it, it's like, oh, like, there's not much here. You can't really interact with things in a meaningful way. Like, you can't really, like, what you're discovering, you can't really do much with it. Or you're going to planets and you can kind of, like, see the algorithm, like, putting things together. And it's just a game that I think it's like that Wizard of Oz moment, like, far too quickly, where it's like you see the man behind the curtain way, 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 way sooner than you wanted to. And comparing it to another game that we talked about on Gen that was, I think about PT. Like, that is also a game that was all mystique. But for as small as that game was, how much it did with that space. And, like, yes, uncovering the mystery was cool, but how it was working within its genre felt so new and exciting, and every moment that you were playing it was memorable. And I think about my time reviewing No Man's Sky, and, like, I remember almost nothing. Like, it's all just, like, a complete blur, and I think that speaks to the shallowness of it at launch. And I really regret that I haven't been able to check in on it since then, because the way people talk about it now and how much they've added, it really seems incredible. And I'm disappointed that I haven't been able to see that transformation.
Hopefully a lesson, to other people that are making stuff like this, that are making games that have this much ambition. Ambition like this can get you on stage in a PlayStation press conference. Ambition like this can really turn heads and get a lot of conversation started about your game. Ambition can also bite you in the ass so hard if you don't know how to market it, if you are not honest with your community. And that's what's so perplexing about Sean and Hello Games is that they had this kind of, they were doing both things at the same time. They had this earnestness, they really felt like a ragtag team of people. There's that infamous picture when it went gold and he's got this huge beard. He just looks so, tired. We did it. You really feel for that team. You're excited for that team. And I think post-launch, even just in the year that was 2016, the fact that they went completely dark, that they're like, all right, we're not going to harass you anymore. We're not going to come out and be like, no. You're like, we're Avengers is now. We're like, no. Just wait. We'll fix it. They were like, let's just go into a cave and figure out what we want to do, and then we'll see you later. And when they came back, everyone was excited because it was the exact opposite of everything leading up to No Man's Sky. It was, here's the things that we've done. Go check it out, as opposed to hearing us talk about it beforehand and hyping it up for you.
Yeah.
Go in and figure out if this is interesting to you and check it out on your own.
All right.
Yeah, you just like really unable to set expectations, because like I wonder what the story of this would have been if it was like more of an early access, like here's where we are now, we're gonna build off from that. I think honestly though, why this game is hard for me to return to, and I think why there's some reluctance there is, like I said, like this game was super disappointing, and I think there is plenty to complain about, rightfully so. But it always transports me to this level of vitriol that I saw towards Sean and Hello Games, and just like there is a difference between criticism and being malicious. Like there just is. And I think about like the response to The Last Jedi and like the venom that people had and just how fucking insane that they were. And it's like, bro, I don't care how much this game upsets you. Like that's not how people act. And I think in a way that vitriol has kind of clouded this game for me. Like it exists kind of outside of the bounds of the game itself, I think.
With this game, I could forgive it to an extent because Hello Games is such a small team. I really think, honestly, they had to go out to partner with Sony to promote this game. I don't know the inner workings of the deal and how it went down, but you get the vibe that maybe Sony was pushing a little bit more aggressively with this game. What was like one of the biggest high-profile indie games shown off at E3 ever.
Yeah.
It set expectations in the bar a little too high, and I think maybe they were just, we're caught in this roller coaster, this storm. We can't do anything. We just got to roll with it and do our best. And they tried to do their best in the cleanup after, when Sony kind of moved on from them. Like, okay, we've released your game. People didn't like it. We're done with you. You guys clean up your own mess. But the other part of it, we were talking about, because you were talking about earlier with Overwatch, is, and this game could benefit from, if you want your game to be something that is played for not days, but weeks, years, and had that sustainability, and we're talking about Sea of Thieves as well, these companies need to be more cognizant and do a better job of content schedules. Like, I think they don't understand how fast-paced all this is.
Yeah.
Fortnite, I know people
roadmaps are essential.
Yeah, people chastise Fortnite for being ridiculously fast. It may be too far to the extreme of too quick, but I mean, that's almost like what people expect. You can't be too far off that mark, I feel like. Hell, you brought some opportunities for me to talk about 14. How much that game updates. We're even at a point in that game where a lot of the community is already starting to complain that it doesn't update as fast enough anymore. Like a few months isn't even fast. Like this is where we are.
Yeah.
This is what you can't, like, months is too long now. It's like weeks. You got to start talking in weeks almost. And that's why I think Fortnite is still so dominant. Why Overwatch has kind of fallen off a little bit. They take too long to update. There's other problems you talked about with Overwatch, but it's one of the issues.
For the next game, I'm going to be completely honest. I put this one in here for me. I got a little bit selfish here, and I was like, you know what? I really want to talk about this. I'm going to have it take up one of the 5 slots. But,
You deserve it,
But
man.
damn it, it's my show.
There's no Street Fighter 6. This is it.
Yeah.
It's a good game to talk about
Absolutely
4 years
worth
later.
talking about, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just getting this out of the way, this is going to sound hyperbolic, but I really mean it. By no means the worst game not even close. Like, there's so many good things about Street Fighter V, but probably my biggest disappointment of the generation in a lot of ways. Because like
The generation.
yeah, I grew up with Street Fighter and had a long like childhood love of Street Fighter and appreciation, but Street Fighter 4 made me appreciate fighting games in a way, on a level that I just didn't before. Like, now I wanted to watch fighting games. Now I started digging into professional players and really trying to like learn it and understand it in a way that I wasn't before. And so it was a game that I think did so much, and I think the fighting game community at that time was like so exciting. There was just so much energy, and I remember like Street Fighter V being like, okay, now we're just gonna take this. We're going to take this energy and we're going to go into the stratosphere. And like there was so much hope and so much optimism. And then Street Fighter V comes out and it's just a mess, man. Like it's just a mess. It's like it feels like it's being like held together by duct tape. It's got so many problems. It has almost no features. And I think the best way that I can sum it up, and I want to talk about positives as well, because I do think they're definitely there. But the best way that I can sum it up is like Street Fighter V feels like weirdly behind the times and outdated when when like it should be leading the pack. Like it has the cachet and the recognition and the community to be like at the front, the king, and it did not feel that way to me.
I think it's also relevant for the Final Fantasy 15 conversation.
Sure.
It's like a franchise. I think it's a franchise that, you know, became a victim of its own success because they felt like we got to be bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it got to bloated to such a huge size that they were like, we can't have modes in this because we, you know, like this is the work that we had done up to this point, you know, and so they have to figure out like, okay, how big can we make this thing and then still deliver expectations for, you know, these, you know, our audience that's hopefully going to show up every time.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Ben, that this, and Brandon, that this game, Capcom, this might be one of the biggest disappointments of the generation, especially when it comes to fighting games, because, as you said, Capcom should be leading, and everyone else, I feel like, who makes fighting games stepped up this generation and said like left not only Capcom but their flagship series Street Fighter in the dirt. Right, they're like eat our dust basically.
I feel like there are different fighting series that you can point to, and it's like, okay, well, they're doing this better than everybody else, and like there's almost nothing in Street Fighter V that I think has that same thing that you can point to where it's like, yes, this is it. This is leading the pack. Like other games should do this. I do think Capcom Fighters Network is a really good idea, and being able to look up people and pro players and see replays within the game, I like that a lot. But I think the presentation, I think, is like the most basic thing that you can point to, but really does paint a strong picture of like when Street Fighter 4 came out, it was like, oh my God, like look at this crazy style. Look how captivating it is, how it feels like new and fresh, but it also feels true to Street Fighter. And then Street Fighter 5 comes out and it's like, yes, it's different, but it kind of looks like Street Fighter 4. Like it, you know, it didn't have that same impact, I think. You know, regardless of what your feelings are on it, it didn't have that same impact.
Part of me, all of me, respects how hardcore Street Fighter is, and fighting games in general just have an infinite amount of depth.
Right.
Like, you know, like StarCraft or chess or something. Just infinite levels of depth and skills that you can learn. But part of the reason I think Mortal Kombat, on the other hand, is so successful, a couple reasons. One of them is a way for novices like myself to get the most out of the game. And that's with the story mode, that's with the towers. And I feel like every time I picked up Street Fighter V, I was in over my head. You know? Like, it had a good... the training modes and stuff, it was like, it had a good way to kind of learn. And obviously with these games, you got to put the time in. But I still think Mortal Kombat 11 can really, and 10 even, ease you in with the campaign, and just casual players can kind of stick around, and that grows the hype of the game too.
Right.
So Street Fighter V just felt alienating in a way. Not that that's a problem, because, you know, you're catering to your hardcore. This is a hardcore fighter, hardcore game, but I think it does help to have some places for the casuals and novices like me to play.
I think a lot of this would be more forgivable if it could lean into getting players into its competitive aspects in a better way. But like, I think about how it does character tutorials, and this is what it does. It's a text box in the training room, and it's like, yeah, this is what like Chun-Li is about, and like you can see her do the move, and it's like, we'll give you like a little like couple sentences of explanation, and it's just like, that's it. Like there's nothing about it that like is really getting you to understand or appreciate or get you excited about wanting to put in the tremendous amount of effort to get good. And I think if it could even do that, right, like all of the other stuff would be forgivable, but it really doesn't. And they try to address that in some ways, right? Like they would come out with characters that would be like quote unquote like less difficult to play, like Ed, and that's true. But even then, it's like, okay, you're making it so this one character like has simple input button combinations, and that's cool, but that doesn't really like make you appreciate how a charge character plays, or that doesn't really make you better at doing dragon punches. It's like it doesn't make you better at appreciating other aspects of the game. It's just like this one character that might be a little bit easier in this one way. It just doesn't seem like an effective or comprehensive way of getting you to appreciate all the elements of the game.
To say something positive about this, Capcom has, like with the Capcom Cup, they have like gone all in with this, and there's been shortcomings in like the extra content. It doesn't have the appeal to like a more casual audience that doesn't bring the high sales, doesn't get as like a larger audience invested. But what they have done to kind of make up for that is have these Capcom Cups, like pushed it harder. It is like the first one to be like what on ESPN, like it's championships at Evo on ESPN with Street Fighter V on there, like on cable TV being on there is a big deal. And I think they've always been pretty good with the community and building up the fighting game scene for this and maintaining it. I think they have tried their best to elevate it, make it more professional. You know, even like with sometimes they've made like having to like clean house with some of the problems that have also plagued the fighting game community and trying to rehabilitate that image a little bit. But at the same time, like you can't deny that this game is just like lacking in so many components. And as you said, Ben, I do like from what I've heard, because this is the Street Fighter I put the least amount of time into, which is like, and I generally like to play Street Fighter, but 5 just was not for me. Their weird approach to information.
Yes.
That like they expect you to go join a community, go watch videos, go watch streams. Like that's the expected way to do it. And that, like, for people who want to play this competitively, that's completely acceptable, and they understand that. But for someone like us, like you or me, Huber, we don't like that's not for us. We just want to jump in and play, and like if that's those limited offerings, that's why it's so daunting. This also is funny because you're talking about Mortal Kombat 11. They offering all that stuff is great. It does have its problems. Same thing with Smash Brothers. This is why Smash Brothers doesn't want to be known as a fighting game. They don't want to end up like what Street Fighter V did, where it's hyper focused on competitive community.
Wow.
And like right now Street Fighter V is viewed, if you're not a competitive player, Street Fighter V is not for you. It's not a casual game to just play and enjoy. You have to get deeply invested in it and play it like religiously to get decent at it.
Well,
they don't ever want Smash to be that, and like it doesn't have to be one or the other. They just didn't find the balance they struck like they did with 4.
Yes, so Damiani, that's a great point. And bouncing off of that, I'll start with the negative and then I'll transition into the positive, because you're absolutely right. Like with Street Fighter V, it's like if you want to get serious about it, you got to go outside of the game and you got to grind that shit out. Like it takes a lot of effort, and I do respect that. But it's a death by 1,000 cuts, where it's like, okay, well, if that's going to be like your barrier to entry, and if that's going to be kind of the dedication that you require, like it needs to work well, and it doesn't. I feel like matchmaking is a really frustrating experience where I don't get consistent quality games. Like, or it's like, I hate playing a match and it's like, okay, this guy's teleporting across the screen. And it's like, if this is what you're going to require, like you have to hold up your end of the bargain. You need to give a consistent, like great experience, right? Like, and Street Fighter V, I just don't feel like in my time with it has offered that. But as a positive thing, and you kind of, I think alluded to this, Damiani, is the dedication to this game has been impressive. You know, it's not a game that just came out, had a bad launch, and then was over. They're still releasing characters for this game. And not only are they releasing characters for it, but I think over the span of Street Fighter V's life, they have released some of the most interesting characters in Street Fighter V, like, and some of them are brand new. Like G is just really cool, I think, both mechanically and visually in terms of personality. And like some of these crazy characters will come out and it will remind you that like at its best, Street Fighter is like unparalleled when it comes to like iconic, striking characters. And I do think there should be a ton of credit given to that, to their commitment and some of the creativity that they've shown as well. Our last game that we are going to discuss, like I said, I had to leave things out. It was hard. There are things that I want to talk about, but we're picking 5, and I wanted to have a conversation about this game because I think this is something, like, a lot of times I feel like the Allies tend to relatively line up with opinions on games, and there tends to be a majority, but this game, there is not. The Last Guardian is extremely divisive. I think in the broader gaming community, it's something that we gave 5 stars to, and a lot of people don't like, but within the Allies itself, and Huber, I think this is a game that you deeply wanted to love, and you didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brutal.
Don't stop at 5 stars, baby. This was our game.
This was a game of the year. You're right. That's a great point,
Don't sell it
Brandon.
short.
Yeah.
Our very first
game of the year.
of
Some
the
people
year.
still
That is
haven't
nice.
forgiven us for it. Some people think
And
we
never
were right.
will.
I love that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
This game is inoffensive to me. It doesn't bother me. I'm not offended by its existence. I just didn't enjoy my time playing it. That is mainly because I just never felt the bond with Trico, and I'm obsessed with bonds. But for whatever reason in this game, I never had the moment. It never clicked with me where I would die for this creature, or, I just never felt those stakes. It was a game of really no stakes for me. It was just going through the motions. The puzzles I didn't care for.
That is fascinating, Huber.
I know. And I've tried so hard to love it. I saw it through all the way to the end, finished it. And I just never connected. I never got there.
Well, we don't have him on this episode, but I went back and where applicable, I looked at our reviews for a lot of these games, and I really actually like some of the language that Bloodworth used to describe it. And he says something along the lines of, this isn't really a story that is told, but rather that is felt. And I was like, that is such a beautiful way of describing this, because I think the thing that does come across is the bond between the boy and the creature. And make no mistake, I think Last Guardian is like super frustrating at points. Like, there are just times where things are not happening the way that they should be. And maybe this is giving the game too much credit, but I like, it almost feels kind of baked into the experience where, like, you're trying to wrangle with this creature, right? And it's not like, in so many games, it's like when you're working with something, it's always done for convenience, right? Like, if you have squad mates, it's like, okay, I can control them either directly, or I can point them to go right over there. I can tell them exactly how to act. And it sort of feels like what Last Guardian is going for is that, no, this is like some unruly thing. It's like if you ever had a pet, like, you have those moments where it's like, this is just not working, or you're just being stupid, or you're just not liking this thing. And I don't think that excuses everything, right? Like, I think sometimes you just have to call a spade, and if it's not working, it's not working. But I also kind of appreciate being like, no, like, we want to frustrate you here. We want it to be, we want there to be kind of this thing that you have to overcome. It's not, always going to work out exactly like you want immediately.
I get that, but it never once felt like that for me. It never felt like, oh, the creature is being the creature, and it has a mind of its own, so it's going to do that.
Yeah.
It always felt like, okay, the game is bugging the shit out of me right now. The game is doing something wrong, or it can't keep up, or can't do what it is supposed to do.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, obviously, Team Eco Game's not going to put a bunch of meters up there that like show, oh, the its mood is this, so it's more favorable to obeying you and stuff like that.
Right.
Obviously, they don't want to break that immersion. They go for a more minimalistic approach. But I do have to agree that while that is a very elegant theory about why Trico acts the way they do at some points, I think the practicality is the game doesn't really reinforce that notion, that there are parts where it is very clearly made obvious that it's doesn't want to listen to you because your bond isn't strong enough yet, or something like that's not obvious is going on between the two of you, why it would happen. It happens at random points, and it leads to frustration, and you see that pattern emerge where it's like, this is gameplay issue. This is not it's not a narrative choice that they did this a character development choice to make you feel that frustration. And they never came out and even said that. They would have come out and said like, oh, we wanted you to feel like that, and it never really came out that way. So I definitely see why people get really annoyed when the AI doesn't behave the way you want it to behave. And for to be fair, some people, the game worked very well for them. It seems like Bloodworth didn't really experience any of the issues that you had, Hubert, or even Ian was having, where, most people, I think, were in between. There'd be a few moments like, okay, obviously this is not working. Yeah, okay.
I would say in between is what happened for me, where there were moments where it was working. I was like, this is magical. And then, you have frustrating parts. But I think, you mentioned like their minimalist approach, Damiani, and I think that goes beyond just how you communicate and work with Trico, but it's everything, right? Like it's how language is used in that game. It's how storytelling is done. It's how they put you into this world, right? It's not like you're going around collecting audio logs. It's not like you have a screen come up and it's like in the beginning, you say that it is not intentional, but I think if you look at every element of that game, like each individual part and how it's presented, I think that minimalism is part of it, right? It's not just the gameplay. It is there's a cohesiveness, I think, to the presentation of The Last Guardian. And I think that's true of other, Team Eco games as well. But
Oh yeah.
I just think I
agree.
could never really settle into it. I despise myself for saying this because I don't like this criticism.
Yeah.
But I think it is applicable to this game where it always felt like I don't want to say it, but I have to. It always felt like a video game. I could never allow myself to be the boy with this creature. I was always doing a video game task.
There was something taking you out of it.
Always.
And
don't want to say that.
Yeah, I think if that happens, I don't think you're going to be able to enjoy any of the Team Eco games in the level that they intended to, and why people sing their praises. I'll
Shadow of the Colossus, I always felt. I felt the bond. I was in that game.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I think that game's the strongest. I mean, in my personal opinion, The Last Guardian is the weakest of the three, honestly. Which is, I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. Even I generally view Shadow of the Colossus as the pinnacle of what they achieved, and I was kind of expecting this to do something more than Shadow of the Colossus. It definitely does things differently, and it had the potential with the bond between Trico and you, but I still feel on the sense, everything they were doing in Shadow of the Colossus, I think works perfectly, and there isn't, the only flaw I can see people having is in, it's like maybe just don't like how the game handles, like the actual the controls don't work with you, but they work as they are supposed to work. It's supposed to feel frustrating climbing up those things. As much as I get annoyed at that, that's what it's supposed to be, and it's very clearly intimated to you that this is not supposed to be easy to climb up this giant moving creature. Whereas in here, there were frustrating moments I don't think it's supposed to be working this way.
Yeah.
So you are drawing me a little bit out of the magic right now. Whereas in Shadow of the Colossus, for 99.9% of the game, it was magical. And it worked beautifully. And
you never want to push your player up to the edge of how things could break. You always kind of want, and this isn't true of all games, but specifically adventure games, the third person exploration games, action adventure. I want to feel like I'm in a world where if I go in any direction, the world still is kind of encased around me. And we talked about this with Final Fantasy 15, where you said the moment that the car went flying, you were like, oh, I see the edge. I see, like you were saying, Ben, where it's the Wizard of Oz, where this was kind of pulled away. And it's always dangerous, Huber, when we've talked about this before, when you have your Dead Rising, where your button that literally I am calling the person I'm on the escort mission with a button, so I can literally count per minute how many times the game's failing. It's literally come on. And you're you gave me the tool to do the thing, so I have the game break button where I can tell this is how broken it is. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a game I am playing on a new gen console today. You get to a chest in a town. You're like, come on, let's open this door. Let's open the door. somebody, anybody. There was a guy behind me. Just you back here, And it's like it's dangerous to have those moments where it's like you're gonna expose the AI. You're guaranteed at least one time out of 20 that it's just not gonna work.
I think the difference, though, and the reason it hit me with The Last Guardian is because of that minimalistic approach that Ben was talking about, where Assassin's Creed is a video game.
Right.
Like, there are numbers going up,
Right.
you're picking loot, like, you're collecting shit. Like, this is trying to be more than that. This is asking you to be in the moment and not think of it as a game. Think of it as more.
Huber,
Yeah.
that is such a brilliant point. And I do think you're super onto something. I think when you play a game and you go in and it's like, all right, spend your skill points on the skill tree. There is a part of your brain that is like, I am playing a video game. And it's like, I think if you don't do that, that's really interesting. But the more information that you take away from the player, I do think there's a natural expectation that things are going to work more smoothly. And so I think that is an interesting point to bring up in terms of player expectation. I also think that this is a game that had tremendous expectation on it, right? Like think about when it came back at E3 2015, it was like, oh, the savior has arrived. And I think any game that is put in that position, no matter what you tell yourself, whether you view it more favorably than you should or less favorably than you should, I do think it has some impact.
The mighty PlayStation has decreed that you are worthy.
Right.
Oh no. Hello Game's like, oh shit.
Pretty excellent to
The
open,
court jester, like,
pretty excellent, Ben, to open with 15 and close with Last Guardian, because they both had similar
Yes.
expectations and development paths.
Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna a game of the year, by the way. We're going to.
I wanted to say one thing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Huber will erupt at this. I hate to say this, Huber, but the reason Last Guardian, I picked it over your Uncharted, is because all the flaws we're talking about in Last Guardian, I don't think they were as flawed as the gunplay in Uncharted 4.
Oh,
I don't know
it's
that
such
we have. I don't know if we have the
I
space
hate
to
naughty dog
elaborate.
shooting. I hate it, man. I'm sorry.
cut it out. Cut it out.
But we are going to move on to the final part of this show, and we are going to play Last Guardian. Comment on it live. I thought, I spent a lot of time mulling over what to pick for this show, and I thought Last Guardian would be interesting because I don't think any of us have played it in years. And we'll see. I'm going to be the one playing it. Maybe I'll be like, yeah, no, this controls like shit. I was wrong. We'll see. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the third and final part of Gen That Was, my favorite part. I am here playing The Last Guardian on PS5. The first time I've played it since it launched. Apparently, I have the disc. So apparently this will run at 60 frames. We'll see if that is the case. I don't know if you guys ever get like different fears when you're playing a game for an audience, but I think my fear for something like The Last Guardian is that like I'm going to get stuck in like the stupidest way and the audience is going to be like, it's right there, you idiot.
definitely. It's going to happen.
I do not stream puzzle games as a rule.
Here's my goal, Huber, for this entire series. It's just the really secretly the goal of Gen That Was is to make you hate things you love, like Knack, and make you love things you hate, like Last Guardian. We're just gonna create like an inverse
Nice.
Huber. All right, my new goal is to like not have a prop show up. We're gonna move before the prop gets there.
Well, if I know he's telling the story older, then I'm not worried about it
Exactly,
anymore.
Jones. I was just going to say that. This game is so predictable. How you think it's going to end is exactly how it's going to end.
What about it's not about the destination but the journey?
Totally. Maybe I need to revisit it and just try to feel the moment.
There is definitely a way characters move in Team Eco games. Like there's I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for.
It's a wobbliness.
I feel
It's
like
fine.
Like a sense
I feel
of
like gravity
inertia?
doesn't work
Yeah.
on them correctly.
Yeah,
It's
it's
splashy.
like Sackboy. It's these little Sackboyish mixed in. There's a little Grand Theft Auto floatiness mixed in.
I wonder if I go to him, will he attack me? No, just
Oh man, I'm just waiting for the
threatening.
bite. Nom nom nom.
This is an excellent way to convey emotion. Like pulling a
Yeah.
blade out of this creature, that's vibes. Good vibes.
It's a classic Fable. Yeah. One thing that I'll say really positively about this game is, and it's something that even in this generation we are still experiencing, even something that I feel flows so well with human movement like Red Dead Redemption 2. You ultimately have that shift between, okay, now I'm moving out of the cutscene into gameplay, and the
Yeah.
character just kind of has to like reset, you know, and like
Yep.
you can still, even in the gen that we are now, see the end of one animation and the beginning of another. And like with Trico, you can't. He's just always moving, you know.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it definitely does feel like, you know, a living thing.
You know, we talked about the minimalism here, and I think it's actually being so effective because, like you think about other games, and it's like you're trying to sneak around. Like I've been playing Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is an excellent game, but I'm just using it to illustrate a point. It's like, oh, when I need to dodge, I'll get a like red circle above my head, or when I'm being seen, like a gauge is filling up. And I think that is useful for sure, and that can definitely service like very fun mechanics. But I think I'm feeling more terror here because like I don't know what he's going to do, or like how close I need to get, or if he's going to do anything. Like taking all of those crutches away from me like makes you feel more helpless, I think.
And it just completely changes the way you view and feel the scene. You know, if there was like a big
but, like,
waypoint
why
over the
is-
barrel and an objective pops up, like grab the barrel to feed it to Trico. It's like,
Right.
no.
Right. Like by not doing that, you have that moment where like, is he going to come after me? I will say triangle should never be the jump button. Why? Never. Hubert, I don't know if you experience this, but because like I'll dip into Assassin's Creed sometimes where you can just climb anything, I like have that inclination in other games where it's like, oh, just jump up it and climb
Yeah.
it, like Assassin's Creed.
Oh, there's some
But
handles.
older games don't work. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have
Ooh,
that
look
thought.
there's a
Ben, I have that thought in real life. I'll look
you?
at buildings and be like, dude, I wanna
so
climb
that makes me worry about your health. That you're just
never.
gonna like just start climbing a building.
Wasn't that even
The
wasn't that even a point in an Assassin's Creed game at one of them, Huber, where it said like it was climbing up a building here will be too unusual or something? Was that ever in one of them or no?
The guards will be like, what is that person doing?
Yeah, like the
It's
comments, like, yeah, is that person
Yeah.
right in the head? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
What is the dumbest you've ever felt playing a video game? Does anything leap to mind?
The Witness doesn't make me feel good.
Oh, like
That's-
you
that's
can
a good
solve
one, yeah.
something. There was a part in was it Paper Mario Sticker Star that I couldn't figure out where to go. And I was spending way too much time on it, and I asked at the time Ryan Stevens, can you email Nintendo, just ask them what the heck to do here? Because I was like, I've been like, this seems wrong. Like I'm clearly, and then like they didn't know what the hell I was talking about. What do you mean? Like they kept giving me solutions to other things, and I'm like, I'm not at that point. There's like this spot I can't get over. All it was literally I just had to like walk up and like it would auto jump, and I was like, "You gotta be shitting me!"
Oh my god.
I was like, "What?" Because I think I tried it once and it just didn't do it on command, and I was just like trying to cross like a river or something. I was like, "Okay."
You know what would be interesting is to take a game, like a very like unintuitive game or like a very hard game or something, and like have every ally play a section of it, right? And just like to see the differences in personality and style in terms of how they approach something.
Brute force.
I wonder what would be a good candidate for something like that. Do you ever entertain, like, if you weren't doing this job, what you would be doing? Because I think one of the things for me is like, man, I would love to work with animals. You know, I don't know in what capacity, if that means like being a zoologist or a veterinarian or what. But I think it's something like I could do and be fulfilled at.
Yeah, that sounds happy to me and stuff. Probably like a zoologist would probably be better. Maybe I can't. The reason I never went into like medical, despite like pressure from parents to go into that field, I can't deal with people being hurt, and then like animals too. Like even though you're helping them, like the fact you'd eventually
sure.
have to deal
I
with
get that.
people and animals dying. It's like I cannot. That will destroy me. I will have no soul at the end of that.
I think one of the biggest complaints I have about this game with the movement and everything, Ben, it comes down to the barrels. Like, you get to a point where you and Trico should have a strong enough bond for it to know that you're trying to give it barrels. Like, just eat the damn barrels. Like, we all know you want the barrels, Trico. We all know. Everyone knows you're a hungry creature. You're gonna eat these barrels. It's nourishing. It's food or whatever it is. There should never be a moment where it's just blankly staring at the barrel or like tiptoeing around it before, like, just eat it.
Hubert,
I will counter that. I will counter that. Yep. Hubert, we feed Sophie every single night after we come home from the walk. That's like that's the thing we do. We take her out.
Before you
between
even
5
go
and 6.
further, has Sophie ever been chained up in a hole?
yes.
Not to my knowledge. But I mean, there's sometimes we'll come home and it's like, here's your dinner, and she's like, I couldn't. It's like, what the hell? And she's just like, no, it's not proper. And it's like, I can maybe guess at what's going on in her head, but like, I don't know. When she's just like, I'm not hungry now, or I want to eat when you're eating. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like, we've had her for so long, and like, I try to do the math, and like, I just can't. I can't figure out why she's such a weirdo, you know? And it's like, oh, maybe she's having a tummy ache, and it's like, do you want a treat? And she's like, oh yeah, give me a treat. And they're like, wait, what? Like,
Oh shit,
Whoa.
dude. I totally forgot that he shot lightning out. Oh shit, he's gonna blow open a hole in the thing. I'm immersed. Well, that's a brilliant word to describe things in games that has just been ruined by overuse.
Immersive?
Yeah, immersive.
Yeah.
Like,
immersion's
it
everything.
is-
Immersion is
Yeah.
everything for me.
Will we think about this game in the decade? Do you think it'll have that longevity?
I think being the follow-up to Shadow of the Colossus, it'll always be, at minimum, a footnote, bare minimum. Same with Eco. Just them in general, Ueda, you know, his gameography.
It's kind of like the Switch, you know? It's like, we didn't really know what Nintendo was going to do next, but then after we like saw the Switch, held the Switch, then you look at the Wii U and you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I get what they were doing. It didn't work out, but okay. You know, it ultimately made something beautiful. And like, I could totally see them being like, Colossus, but he's your friend. I'm like, ooh, you know?
Yeah.
So now where do we go? You know, now we tried this. Some parts worked, some parts didn't. What's next? You were Trico? You know, I wonder.
This is making me so curious, Ben. You know, I just love replaying games so much.
Yeah.
And especially after the fact, when the noise has simmered down to a whisper.
I
It's
do
like
think that
before
that's
this-
something that like Metacritic and stuff is kind of like fucked up, because I there's such an emphasis on being like, no, this game is this numerical value, the conversation's over, you know, it's a 62, that's it. And I just don't think that's like healthy for discourse.
Yeah.
Like, I think changing your mind is awesome.
Yeah.
You know, some people view that as weakness, but I think that
My God,
that being open to being wrong is good.
yeah.
You know what I'm
And
really
you
curious to
change.
see? Yeah. Ben, do you know what I'm super curious to see if the narrative changes or not? Even just a little bit. Even if I just see one tweet from a person who's like, well, now that I really think about it, is the ending of Mass Effect 3. Because
Oh, sure.
now you're going to have all these people going back and replaying the entire trilogy again
Yeah.
that know exactly how it's going to end. And I
Right.
wonder if that, because those expectations are going to be set for like, what, 120 to 160 hours of gameplay, that by the time they finally get to it, they're like, I kind of enjoyed it that time, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I actually kind of got wrapped up in that.
Lower your expectations.
Hubert, you mentioned something a long time ago, and I think about it from time to time, where you talk about Roger Ebert and how he was very open about how like a certain time in his life affected how he critically viewed things. And I thought how true that was. And you're right. It's not just like willingness to be wrong, but like willingness to be like, well, here's where I was in my life. You know, like people talk about like how having kids changes what they how certain storylines resonate with them or whatever. You know, something along those lines.
Yeah, the expectations, you know, Bloodworth's 5 out of 5. A lot of factors going into this game. Definitely held it to a higher critical standard.
Yeah.
Even unconsciously, you know, consciously and unconsciously. with my expectations. And obviously coming off of Shadow of the Colossus too. I mean, how do you follow up
I mean,
one of the
no matter
greatest
what,
possible games? Like,
yeah, no matter what, that's a dark cloud, right? Like, because the thing about Shadow of the Colossus is it's so singular. It's not like, wow, that was a really good, insert genre here. Like, it's its own genre. Like, Shadow of the Colossus is just Shadow of the Colossus. It's by itself.
yeah.
I mean, you could compare it to other Team Ico games, but even then, it definitely feels like its own thing.
Do we ever learn what's in these things? Is it like diapers or something? Like what is like? I'm assuming it's fish, right? Like that's what's in the barrel.
I think it's Yule scum.
I think
actually.
it's Mako. No, I think it's
Is
Mako.
it's the butterflies, right? It's butterfly eggs.
It's definitely Mako.
I kind of want to play through all of this again.
Yeah,
This is on the kinda.
Well, no, I want to get away from the kind of, because I was really open to the idea of like, maybe I'll play this and like I'll have a moment where I'm like, this isn't very good. And obviously, we're in the super beginning, right? So nothing is set in stone, but like, this is really clicking with me.
This
man.
is a gaping hole in my gaming.
Okay. I need you to come over here so I can go in this hole. Oh wait, maybe I can climb up this? Yes, I can.
Nice. We're assassins now.
Yeah.
GG.
Yeah. Roll credits.
Made it.
GG easy.
That's why this game is so divisive, chat.
The Miles Morales is short.
I'm coming, bitch.
So
And I mean,
good.
as a cat owner, Ben, how true is this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Damiani. No, you stay in your room.
Yes.
No, stay in the no.
He says this new thing where every time I open the apartment door, he runs out.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do anything. He just stands there, but he's
Yeah.
like so excited to get outside.
I love that with the cats outside. They're like, all right, now what?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
I feel like I can breathe now. It's a great scene also.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
you feel the sun. Like
Yeah.
you feel that it feels the sun. Like it was cooped up in there for a long time.
But yeah, that's going to do it for Gen That Was. This has been delightful. Thank you so much to Brandon Jones, Michael Huber, and Michael Damiani. It's been really a pleasure to work on this series and have these debates with each other and share these memories. And this has been a fun one. See you guys for 2017. That's where you should cut, Ian. That's where you should cut.
Butthole, and we're out.
This is the Gen That Was.